All my life, I've been a fan of scientific knowledge, philosophical knowledge, religious ideas. I subscribe to all the science magazines, etc., etc., even though I'm not really a scientist, nor a guru or spiritual teacher. I'm just a student explorer of the mystery of our existence and the awareness of the mystery of our existence. And I pursue what yogic traditions might call Gyan Yoga, the yoga of the intellect. But while I pursue that, it is also startling at times to recognize that everything we know conceptually, including the most refined scientific and philosophical knowledge, can actually deepen ignorance when it strengthens the sense of me, the knower, in a world of things to know. So Vedanta treats this paradox and calls it avidya. We can become more informed and yet further from what we call freedom because of the seduction of knowing. We live in a culture that worships knowing. I worship knowing too. The more facts we accumulate, the more sophisticated our theories, cosmology, evolution, science. The more sophisticated our theories, the more we feel we are progressing. The mind believes, if I only understand enough the cosmos, the brain, trauma, quantum fields, I will finally be safe, fulfilled, and at peace. Never happens. It's very frustrating actually to realize this. Because the one who's trying to be safe remains unquestioned. That's the problem. The knower's position, I am the separate individual trying to figure out life, is simply assumed as real. In this way, knowledge becomes a subtle armor around I, this character, rather than a doorway that dissolves it. The result is a strangely modern form of avidya. Avidya means ignorance. We drown in explanations while remaining fundamentally confused about who we are. So in Advaita Vedānta, avidya is often translated as ignorance because it is not a simple absence of data. It is a positive misknowing, a deep misidentification. It is the unexamined conviction, I am this body, this mind, this biography. Deepak Chopra. It's a very flimsy identity, easily destroyed or elevated by public opinion. So from that basic error, an entire superstructure of experience arises. Fear, desire, seeking, defensiveness, comparison, and the endless project of self-improvement. Notice that this error is not corrected by adding more content to the mind. You can fill the intellect with neuroscience, non-dual philosophy, trauma theory, astrophysics, and still be living as the same separate center, subtly haunted by lack. Avidya is not what you know, but in who you take yourself to be as the one that knows. That is why someone can be very learned and yet deeply bound. Their learning refines the costume of me. It does not expose the costume as the costume, this whole thing. So the Upanishadic tradition speaks of two broad orders of knowledge, lower and higher, aparavidya and paravidya. Lower knowledge includes everything the mind can grasp as an object. Ritual, know-how, religious doctrine, worldly skills, sciences, philosophies, psychologies, even the subtle spiritual cosmologies. It is lower not because it is worthless, but because it operates entirely within the subject-object structure. I, here, know, that, there. Higher knowledge is of a different order. It is not one more thing added to the mind's collection. It is the clear seeing of the seer. It is the recognition, immediate and intimate, that the aware presence in which body, mind, and world appear is what I am. And that this awareness is not private, not limited, not born, not dying. In that seeing, the basic misidentification is undone. So how does knowledge actually increase ignorance? First, by reinforcing identity. Each new layer of expertise can become another mask that the I wears. I'm a scientist. I'm a philosopher. I'm a spiritual seeker. I'm a non-dual teacher. The more intricate the mask, the more convincing it seems. Knowledge becomes identification fuel. Second, by multiplying distinctions, the mind starts to live by dividing and dividing. This versus that, true versus false, sacred versus profane, sinner versus saint, divine versus diabolical, awakened versus sleep. The more it knows, the more subtle distinctions it can draw. There's nothing inherently wrong in this, but ultimately, we get lost in our own map. We forget that these distinctions are conceptual overlays on a single, indivisible reality. Also, by creating subtle arrogance and subtle despair, this furthers our ignorance. Arrogance, I understand this, others don't. Despair, there's too much to understand. I will never get there. Both center the separate knower. Both deepen the trance of being a limited self who must either defend its high ground or confess its inadequacy. So when Vedanta says that knowledge can be an obstacle, it is pointing precisely here. As long as knowledge is possessed by an imaginary owner, Deepak Chopra or whoever, it fortifies the illusion of separation. Yet Vedanta is not anti-intellectual. It does not say stop thinking, stop studying, just sits in some blank state. On the contrary, it takes thinking and inquiry very seriously, but as instruments to turn the light around. Instead of the light there, the light on who is exploring. So in traditional Advaita, scriptural teaching and reasoning are used to question the knower's position. The mind is invited to examine its assumptions. What exactly is this I who claims to know or not know? Is it the changing body? Is it the fluctuating mind? Can that which is known as an object, whether it's thought, sensation, emotion, experience, truly be the subject? Through this disciplined inquiry, the intellect is re-educated. It comes to recognize that what I am fundamentally is not any object appearing, but the aware space in which objects appear and disappear. At a certain point, the mind recognizes its own limits. It sees that awareness itself cannot be captured as an object because it is that by which all objects are known. This is where knowledge begins to cease being avidya. It stops pointing away from the self and starts pointing back to it. There is a quiet but radical shift. Initially, the attitude is, I, this person, and I'm gaining spiritual knowledge. I now know more about non-duality, the self, Brahman. In this phase, ignorance is actually at its most dangerous level because it has begun to dress itself in spiritual language. The ego becomes a non-dual scholar. But as inquiry deepens, something collapses. The supposed knower is exposed as another appearance in awareness. The idea, I am this limited subject, is seen as a thought, arising and vanishing in the very presence it was trying to claim. What remains is not a new belief, but a simple, self-evident fact. Awareness is. It is here, it is without effort. Everything appears in it, body, mind, world. The feeling of being a separate me, the arising and disappearing of knowledge and ignorance, the subject-object structure softens. Life is recognized as a seamless display in and as this aware presence. At this point, all previous knowledge is reinterpreted. It is seen as part of the dream, sometimes a distraction, sometimes a pointer, but never what you truly are. The mistake was not that you studied physics or psychology or Vedanta. The mistake was only the unnoticed assumption. I, this finite knower, own this knowledge. When the mind's project of mastering reality begins to fail, there can be a moment of crisis. I don't actually know what this is. I don't know who I am. I've been through that. Dark night of the soul. The heebie-jeebies of non-identity. So from the old standpoint, this feels like defeat. From a Vedantic standpoint, it is grace. This not knowing is not apathy, not cynicism, and not mere confusion. It is the loosening of the claim to stand outside of life as an expert. It is the relaxation of the knower's pose. In that humility, the immediacy of experience, this breath, this sensation, this moment of awareness shines forth as self-luminous. You discover that reality does not need your concepts to be what it is. Paradoxically, this is where true understanding begins. Not the brittle confidence of having all the answers, but the luminous intimacy of being what everything already is. The heart recognizes itself in all forms. The mind can continue to learn, to explore, to play, but it no longer seeks itself in what it knows. What does this look like in ordinary life? Well, you might still love science, philosophy, psychology. You can engage them deeply, contribute to them, teach them, but they are no longer strategies to complete you. They are expressions of the fullness that is already the case. You know now that no concept will ever capture the real, and yet you're free to use concepts as tools, as art, as service. You might still read and teach spiritual texts, but now the purpose of every sentence is to dissolve the very reader who's holding the book. You no longer mistake elegant theories for liberation. You're willing moment to moment to let go even of your most cherished formulations in favor of the direct taste of awareness here and now. In this way, everything we know is quietly returned to where it came from. Knowledge is not destroyed. It is dethroned. It no longer stands between you and your life. It becomes transparent. The ancient promise of Vedanta is not that you will eventually know everything, but that you will recognize yourself as that in which everything is already known, effortlessly, silently, prior to thought. Then knowledge no longer increases ignorance, because the one who is trying to become free through knowing has dissolved into the freedom that always was. Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma.